Earlier today, as I'm recording this, the International Court of Justice in The Hague handed down its first decision in the genocide case brought by South Africa against the nation of Israel for its activities in Gaza. And the decision was basically, this case has merit. We need to continue to study this. We need to continue considering this. We're not going to throw this out. We're not going to dismiss this case. This must continue. There is enough evidence and there is enough reason to take seriously the charge that Israel has violated the Genocide Convention in its activities in Gaza. So it's a good result. Right? It's not the best possible result, but it's a good result. It's not dismissing the case as Israel had requested. And it made me think of some of the things that the Israeli attorney, the Israeli representative said during the presentation of Israel's case to the court a couple of weeks ago when things first started rolling. And one of the details that the Israeli attorney pointed out to the court was that Israel was one of the first countries to sign on to the International Court of Justice, to ratify the treaty that created the court, to become, subject to the authority of the court, because Israel is a country that was founded out of an infamous, horrible genocide, and Israel and the people of Israel know, in theory anyway, better than anybody, the importance of taking necessary steps to prevent something like the Holocaust from happening again. It reminded me of the fact that there is another international court, not the International Court of Justice, but the International Criminal Court, which is also headquartered in The Hague and is a little different from the ICJ. The International Criminal Court is empowered by a separate treaty, and the United States, even though the United States is a signatory to the treaty that created the International Criminal Court, we never actually ratified the treaty. So technically, the United States is not subject to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. I almost said I've always wondered why that is, but I don't really wonder why that is. Like, I feel like I know why that is. I know why the United States never ratified the treaty and never placed itself under the authority of the International Criminal Court. And there's two reasons. And one of them is related to our historical tradition. And then the other is rooted in like our national psyche. The historical thing is that once we won our American Revolution, we became pretty anti-revolutionary for the most part. When the French Revolution happened in the 1790s, and then after the French Revolution was successful, all the other monarchies of Europe, or the major European powers other than France, saw what happened in France and said, oh no, fuck that. And they all declared war on the revolutionary French government because they said, no, you're not overthrowing monarchs in Europe. That's not happening. And there was the question of whether or not the United States would enter that conflict or involve itself in that conflict in some way to aid revolutionary France. And there were some in George Washington's cabinet, specifically Thomas Jefferson, who wanted that to happen, who felt that we owed a debt to the people of France, and also that the revolutionary government of France was a natural ally of ours ideologically and morally, because they were doing the same thing that we had done and trying to throw off the shackles of a monarchical system and replace it with a democracy and the government of the people. And ultimately, George Washington said, nah, we're going to stay out of it. He issued this thing that was called the Proclamation of Neutrality, that basically said, we're not getting involved. You guys in Europe fight it out amongst yourselves, and we'll just be over here whenever you're done. So the United States, since our revolutionary beginnings, has been very anti-revolution, except for all the revolutions in other people's countries that we have been either responsible for starting or have supported because we felt like the outcome of the revolution, if the revolutionaries won, it would be better for us. And a lot of our activities, a lot of our behind-the-scenes machinations, a lot of our, especially in the 20th century, a lot of the things that our CIA did or is said to have done or is thought to have done in terms of acting to decide the outcome of internal affairs of various countries. Some of that, I don't know, might make certain Americans or certain American agencies or certain parties within the United States subject to prosecution in the International Criminal Court. So we're going to say, nah, we're not. We're just not doing that. We're not doing that. We're not going to subject ourselves to that court. We're not doing that. So that's the historical reason. The more philosophical reason, the reason that is more rooted in our national character is there's this thing that I imagine has been central to the national frame of mind of the United States since the Revolution, and has evolved and changed in various ways. But it's this idea that, you know what? No one's going to boss us around. No one's going to tell us what to do. Even in the most benign, diplomatic, community-centered way, nobody's going to tell us what to do. We're Americans. We do what we want. We chart our own course. We are the masters of our own destiny, and we will not place our country or our laws or our sovereignty or our desires or our whims or whatever. We will not place that under the authority of any international group. We're perfectly fine to be part of the international community as long as we're the ones that are calling the shots. We like that here in the United States. We like calling the shots. We like joining groups that we can lead or we can boss around. We don't like working with others. We're not a work well with others type of country. We never have been. It's a strange, but I think understandable, although not laudable, contradiction in our national character, because we are very, very anti-authoritarian, except when we get to be the authority. And it breaks down below the national level as well. You see this happening in the Republican Party with Donald Trump. It's been that way with the Republicans for years before Trump. As I've said many times, Trump did not introduce anything to the Republican Party. He just amplified things that were already there and brought things to the surface that had been kind of hiding under the surface. Now, we'll never admit it. Donald Trump, other than his little jokes, that he makes with Sean Hannity, where he says, well, I'll be a dictator for the first day, Other than stuff like that, he doesn't come out and admit, hey, I want to be a dictator. Hey, I want to overthrow the Constitution. Hey, I just want to be president for life, right? He never comes out and literally says that. But it's a very easy inference to make from the policies he supports, from the many public statements he makes. Like, it's not a wild, out of left field interpretation to say, oh, that dude wants to be a dictator. It's pretty obvious. The assumption might be like, oh, but this is America. We value democracy. We're proud of the fact that we don't have a monarch. We don't have a king. We don't have a dictator. That we will abide no dictator here in the United States, right? Well, it turns out a lot of people in the United States are perfectly happy to abide a dictator as long as they can pretend that it's not really a dictator, as long as they can tell themselves that it's not really a dictator, and as long as they perceive that the dictator is on their side. And one of the words for that sort of mindset, for that sort of governmental philosophy, is fascism. A part of what makes fascism is that the dictator convinces the people that the dictator is actually one of them. The dictator isn't imposing anything on the people. The dictator is a champion of the people. He's a champion of the people. And what he's doing is he's protecting them from this much greater threat that is out there, or that is in here, or that is over there. But it's the cause of all their problems. And it's the thing that wants to take away all the good things that they have. So the dictator, as a champion of the people, is going to impose all this authority over the government, impose all this authority over the people so that he can be strong enough to defend the people against this threat over here, those people over there that are super bad. And in a way, it's super American in the worst ways. It doesn't reflect our high-minded ideals. It doesn't reflect the kind of people and the kind of country that we say we want to be or that we ought to be, but it reflects who a lot of us are and always have been. We don't mind the prospect of a government putting its boot on people's necks, as long as the boot is on the right people's necks. And as long as we can tell ourselves, even though it's probably not true, as long as we can tell ourselves that, well, it's kind of us putting the boot on their neck. Like, because the fascist government, the dictator, the Donald Trumps, like, well, they're on our side. We're all in this together. We're Trump supporters. He's doing this for us. And he'll have our back if we have his. So when he puts his boot on someone's neck, he's doing that for us. So it's kind of us doing it too, which is a lie, because if it suited Trump or any other dictator to put their boot on the necks of people who had supported them up to that point, they would do that. History shows us that that has happened again and again and again. There's no such thing as loyalty to a fascist or to a dictator. Their only loyalty is to themselves and to the maintenance of their power. But it's a fairy tale that their supporters can tell themselves. And it's anti-authoritarian authoritarianism. It's a super American thing. And if we're not careful, we're going to have it actually empowered through the government, and then we're going to be in a heap of trouble. And it's going to be our fault, and we will ultimately be the instruments of our own undoing. And hey, that's kind of an American thing too. It's also kind of a human thing, which just goes to show that despite the best efforts of so many Americans throughout the history of my country to prove otherwise, we really are all the same in the end. We're all in the same boat, if not subject to the same courts.